Hello and welcome to Optional Rule. My name is Scott. I'm the host of this now occasional live stream that talks about D&D, any kind of tabletop role-playing game theory. I've been doing a lot of world building lately, and that's what I'm going to do tonight. So tonight's just a chill hangout. If you have any questions, you have any observations, you have anything you want to talk about, just go ahead and leave them down on the tavern wall. I'd love to talk about them. I'll read your questions out loud as long as you're okay with it. And thank you for coming. I appreciate it. If you're watching this later on YouTube or Twitch or whatever, I hope you'll go ahead, give a like, subscribe, all those kind of things. Gandhian, great to see you. How you doing tonight? Great to have you here. So what I thought I'd do is just chat a little bit about D&D and do a fun hangout, see what's on your mind about it. I was going to talk a little bit about religion and world building in your tabletop role playing game world. I've been slowly putting together a homebrew world, doing some live streaming around that. I had a tweet a little bit earlier that was it was popular. I think some people didn't receive it well, other people did, and it was around sort of just this assertion as I was thinking through religion in my homebrew world. The religion is kind of dry and boring to me in most tabletop role playing games, especially D&D. It's we'll talk a little bit about why I think that. I'd love to hear about whether you like it, whether you think it's dry, what would you like to see in it. I'll talk a little bit about what I want out of it. What I do in these live streams is I don't just try to create an interesting idea. I'm trying to get to like what's the utility of it for a game? Like why is it not just hopefully an interesting idea, but what do I get out of it? What kind of principles do we want out of this aspect for a game? What adds to the sense of adventure? What adds to role-playing opportunities versus what doesn't? And that's where I sort of want to go with it tonight. So, again, if you have any ideas, I'd love for you to put them down in the tavern wall below, or comment later if you're seeing this on YouTube or something like that. So, first of all, the creds, go ahead and if you have not followed me, I hope you will follow me on Twitch. Excuse me, on Twitter, on Twitch, of course, here, or YouTube if you follow me. Go ahead and follow there. Mostly I'm on Twitter. I'm not selling anything, so no Patreons to pimp, no nothing like that. So yeah, this is just for funsies. I hope you'll find it funsy too. So I got some text up right now about one of the previous world building elements that I did on the nature of the soul. This is going to feed the idea of what some potential I see out of what I created here for homebrew world and religious creation. But I'm going to talk about what do we want out of religion in role playing games? Like what's the whole point of it? But this 3-part soul that I'll get into later, I think that's going to drive a lot of what I'm going to write. And I'm actually not going to write up full religions. I'm going to say, what's the possibilities what are some of the variations that cultures in the world will play on their religion here, right? What does that give me as a game master? And what does it give players? Gandhian was saying, I'm putting in my homebrew world a schism in one of the major organized religions between the more dominant conservative-esque school of thought and the more militant missionary sect. Should be good backdraft boot campaign. Yeah, I did I'm going to talk down real world religions in this stream a lot, so don't take that personally. I think that there's fodder there. I'm not jazzed for it in D&D games, and I'll talk about why in a second. But to your point, I did a great campaign. One of the best campaigns I ever ran was in a system called Burning Wheel, which is very narrativist. But it was I had made this homebrew version of the Kingdom of Jerusalem around 1130, excuse me. So after the First Crusade, and the interesting part about that was the interplay of different faiths and the clash of cultures. Right, it was not geared towards European or point of view. The Levant didn't have a certain point of view. The point of view was, having spent some time over in different parts of the world, my point of view was, what is that? How do you deal with two elements, the clash of culture and religions, but also this now new generation of people that were born there who had feet in different areas, and it wasn't that simple, and I found that really interesting. Gundian says, yeah, it's not a religion that covers the world. It's just a major religion for one of the largest countries, which is now somewhat split in half-ish between two groups. Yeah, tension is like the fuel for games, narrative, right? Tension is the fuel of all narratives. Whether that be reflective of modern religions or not is sort of irrelevant. The fact that what is the driving tension, and in a role playing game sense, what you want is something. Matter of fact, we'll get down to let's. I'm gonna do a little bullets. I'm big on bulleting, so I'm gonna talk about that tonight. But like, what? It doesn't matter if it's. I talk a little bit on Twitter, and it got a reaction because I was saying that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I was saying I find it a little boring because I think people can't conceive of religion outside of the context of like evangelical modern Western thought. And I thought that's a little boring, right? History is much broader than that. The idea of religion itself is even a modern construct. And I just thought it was a little boring. And more specifically, they're applying that to old gods and like the Forgotten Realm, like this idea that being a first of all, that anybody would worship Thor rather than honor him. And then second, that they would be evangelical about it, I think is missing something. And first of all, it's why, like, there's no why there, right? There's no promise of anything. They just think of religion that way. And I think it leaves things kind of dry. Like, why are people clerics? Why are people warlocks? What are they getting out of it other than like an encounter ability? I wanted to do a little bit. So what do we want out of that, right? Conflict, right? So we want to have interesting conflict that can be nuanced without vilifying anyone in particular. I'm going to spell horribly, so I apologize for that ahead of time. Vilifying anyone in particular. That players can see themselves going either way, right? And that people they meet in the world don't fall into easy buckets of evil and good, right? Just based on what God they follow. That it's sort of, it creates a sense of interesting conflict, right? So in that case, it has to have some threat. So you want something that, what else do I want out of it? I wanted to drive, the narrative in sensible ways. So I also add to the first bullet, drive the narrative in sensible ways. So there's no like, we run into this a lot. Gandhi was saying, agreed, most of the religions, minus the one in Civil War, are more primitive, shamanistic, superstitious in their setting. Yeah, I'm still trying to get away from that primitive idea because again, it's a Western construct. But yeah, I agree. I think I try to put all NPCs in the world as shades of gray, not black and white. Yeah, I'm even okay with evil and good. It's just evil and good is kind of a side effect of behavior, right? Why is your behavior driven to a certain thing? What do you get out of it? I think that if you look at ancient religions, I just said modern religion is sort of is a construction of the West, which it is. But ancient religions, they were very transactional. You didn't worship a god, you petitioned a god. Because in their view, understanding why thunder came down was just a story that told themselves to explain what they saw in the natural world. It wasn't some esoteric, it didn't start at least with this esoteric other world where that narrative sort of evolved just trying to come to grips with what they saw in the physical world. So to them, they were just explaining science, what their equivalent of like a science would be. An understanding of the natural world is what evolved. Gandhian said, good and evil, in my opinion, they're also dependent on the person viewing the actions. Yeah, I mean, I think there's moral relativism. I mean, this is what gets interesting to me. To me, is interesting is, I mean, I do think there are things that are certainly absolutely evil, right? But what's the line? As people sort of degrade up and down, or advance up along that scale, when does it get to the point of clearly evil? When does it get to point to like a choice of well, it's an understandable choice? And what does that do for a game? Again, this is about games, right? I'm not running a theology channel here. I'm talking about games. How do you create games? So I want, first thing I want is interesting conflict that's nuanced with vilifying, without vilifying anyone in particular. Drive the narrative in sensible ways. It gives, and the other thing I want is it gives motivators in narrative, or NPC or player PC actions that let them I want to create a sense of adventure, that creates a sense of tension and adventure. What else do I want out of it? I want it to tie to the world lore that creates a I can never say this word. This verisimilitude, is that the word? I can never pronounce it right. But this sense of realism in the world, right? That it drives, it connects the narrative, connects the mechanics, and the world in a way that drives a sense of tangible reality. All right. So, I mean, and let me talk about what I mean by that. Mechanics. I'm totally not spelling that right. Mechanics and the world in a way that drives a sense of tangible reality. Verisimilitude. Yeah, I still can't pronounce it. I'm looking right at it. I know the word. I just can't get it out of my mouth for some reason. That's one of those words that sticks with me. Verisimilitude. I'll try it. That's the best I could do. As an aside, inside joke, the group playing D&D friends, they call it very salami tube. Yeah, that's about right. I just trip over it. So what do I mean by this? So what we have is you get the Forgotten Realms or anything like that. You sort of have evil cultists for no real apparent reason. They're just evil cultists to be evil cultists. I mean, let's be real. The reason why they are is because you want to be able to, without any moral quandaries, just slaughter people after, and lots of people as adventurers. So that's the role they serve. But without a clear narrative, without a clear reason why, it's hard to. You're doing nothing but reacting. Like, oh, the bad guys have shown up again. Let's have a fight. You're not thinking through, well, what do the bad guys want? How do I develop a strategy to counter that? How do I use my own religion to engage with it? How do I drive role playing conflict? Maybe the players agree with them or parts of it, or so there's no role playing conflict. It's all just a reason why they're there. It's not even really a reason. It's a reason why it's okay to kill them in the encounter. It's not really a reason why do you have conflict to fight in the first place. So I guess that's what I should say. A cultist equals used to kill humanoid races that aren't goblinoid. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think that's the problem with alignment and race. I mean, there's a lot of talk, good talk, about racial bioessentialism and how that's bad for D&D, and it is because it's driven by this idea that certain races are low culture and therefore they can be killed, and people are uncomfortable with that because it maps to what people feel like are happening, reflective of indifferences that we have in the real world that have a very, very serious impact on people in the real world. So the idea that people are sort of, no one wants in their fun like a toxic attitude that comes out in real life. Like that's a core discomfort of that, and it should be just uncomfortable, right? That should be a moment to sort of like, that's not what really we want. Instead, it's okay to sort of get into a fight. And in D&D, I think what the acceptable parlance is understanding a core conflict between people that have different goals, that they end up with a fight and maybe someone dies, but that's not this wholesale slaughter. So I think we want to give some shape. So that's one of the other things we want out of it. It gives shape to the conflict that creates more than just a body count or foes to kill. Right? We want something out of the religion. And it doesn't always have to be religion. I mean, if you get in a fight with a bunch of bandits, you clearly understand these people are trying to steal something from me. I want to keep my stuff and I want to keep my life. So no one has a problem with fighting bandits, right? But it gets to be problematic when the player's going to someone else's home, kicking in the door and saying, let's kill them and take all their stuff, right? That's a harder sell. And so, like, the next step up from it is they come up with this weak tea argument about, well, they're evil cultists. So when we kick in their door, we're taking all their gold. And but instead, if you had a good religious structure, like one of the options, one of the dials you can turn in a world, doesn't have to always be religion. Matter of fact, usually it's probably not going to be. But politics is one of them. This is an opposing faction. We'll have a resource that will put my faction at a disadvantage. That's one way to do it. Religion is something that is against my core religious beliefs, and that's why I'm going forward, or I'm trying to get something from my core religious beliefs that has some realistic motivation in the world to why am I doing this. That's the point of it. Uh, Gundian was saying, I love the fact that you brought up the topic. One tweak I've done at my game, at the game at my table, is to move racial ASIs over to two choices of an ASI depending on which class you choose. Yeah, I don't even tag it to the class. I just let them take, you can take two racial ASIs and that's it. +2 and 2 stats, go for it. I like Tasha. I like Tasha's. I know people are people get upset about that. I don't buy that logic. I think the difference that we're talking between like a plus, because we're talking about 2 points in a stat, is a +1, 5% difference. It's not that, like, if so people who are really married to this idea of bioessentialism, a little creepy to me, first of all, but second of all, it's not enough of a big of a difference to be arguing over. If this was truly like the difference between the strength of a bull and like weak little old fat me, then sure, I'm down for that discussion about how biology makes a difference. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about like someone who's like a hair slighter, a hair stronger, a hair faster, nothing that couldn't be, and you're all maxing out as 20. So nobody goes to 22 because they have a +2 to their stat. So I don't buy it. So, anyway, I'm way off topic here. That's a racial discussion, which I'd love to have a world building on. So what I want out of this is some way to use the spiritual point of view that motivates characters. Hey, Django Wolf, it's great to see you, man. How you doing? I'm here, but not really. My internet is slow, so the stream stops for a long period. Sorry about that. But it's great to see you, man. I really enjoy interacting with you on Twitter. And when anyone should follow Django Wolf, he's a future... who did you say you were going to be earlier? Author or somebody like that. He's a definitely great follow on Twitter, so I recommend him. So where was I going with this? So I want to drive good conflict in some kind of way. So, but I don't want to lock it into a religion. Like somebody brought up, Think DM was bringing up earlier that Eberron, he thought, did really great with religions. I differed on that only in that I don't think it provided great reason. And matter of fact, it clouded some of the reasoning. But I think in terms of the philosophies, like if you look at the setting of Eberron, the difference between the Sovereign Host and the Dark Six and the Silver Flame and the Light Path of Light, all this stuff. There's several others. They were good. They were really interesting. They were good, philosophically distinct. They had a good ethos behind it. What they lacked were, there's no real, I don't understand what the afterlife is. Why are you bothering to worship these gods? Like what's the end point for you in the midst of all this? Most people worship in the Western sense, and it's still worship, right? That's a problem for me, because again, it's just weak tea. It's a highly Westernized version of they worship. Like there's this idea of an omnipotent, omnibenevolent, mystical force. That's a very Western kind of thing. And I just think it's weak tea. If I make a recommendation for a product, not mine, I just really like it. Grizzlax's Guide to Ancestry on DM's Guild. Very good. Yeah, great. That's great. All right, so what do I want to build? What am I looking for out of this? Again, I'm not going to detail the specific adventures, but I laid down in a previous live stream the soul. I did some world building around the soul. What I asserted there in this homebrew that I'm doing, that every soul, what distinguishes a thinking of a true being, is that they have a 3-part soul. They have Manos, which is the part that is tied to their body and physical needs and desires. They have the Philos, which is their emotion, inner strength, and spiritual power. And then they have their Baros, which is their higher self, their enlightened self, their true core being, right? And that when you die, the Manos stays with your body in the real world, and the other 2 parts of your soul go up to the afterlife. And there it gets a little fuzzy. And the reason why I want it to be fuzzy, when we get to this religion part, I want to talk about like different plays on why do people worship to do different things. Like, do they try to get themselves reincarnated by reunifying their Manos with their Philos and Aberos? Are they trying to fuel the power of their Philos, like their spiritual self, to not sort of dissolve in the afterlife, to maintain their sense of identity? Are they trying to purify their thoughts so they become a higher being in the afterlife? Though there's going to be religions built around these 3 parts of the soul, and I want this to be the main driver for religion in the world, understanding that religion doesn't have to be tied to a god. Matter of fact, I'm going to set down one of the precepts I want out of this, some principles. I'm going to sit down on my first principle. The gods themselves don't care about you. I'll just keep that wording, right? That the afterlife isn't dependent on them. So that's a constant. Now these are going to be global constants, and it's going to vary significantly, right? However, people work with the gods in a transactional way. They work with the gods transactionally for favors, power, and help them achieve goals in the afterlife. And maybe that's not clear, but what I'm trying to say is there's no like judgment. There's no sense of judgment. This is truly an ancient world, like a Summerlands or a Valhalla or something like that, where it's really, there's a single afterlife that's just dependent on how you went into it. No God lets you in. This is just how souls work. And that's what I'm trying to create here. So in this, people are generally going to be focused on one or multiple senses of their religious structure is going to be tend to focus on one part of the soul. So religious practices, even though they all agree, the global concept of the soul is known because this is D&D. You can cast spells. That's one of the big differences between a D&D world and the real world is there's less question, right? You can cast spells. You can talk to the gods. You can do all kinds of things that give you direct answers that you could not get in the real world. And you have direct evidence of in a way that you don't. You have very unambiguous direct evidence that you don't have in the real world. So I don't want to play at that. I want just people know. So they know the nature of the soul. They know you go to the afterlife somehow, but things get fuzzy there. So globally, all religions tend to focus on some aspect of one particular aspect of a part of the soul. All right. So what does that mean? So we have three parts of the soul. Let me see if I may recommend. You are but a puny ant beneath my feet, and I dare not even step on you because I might make my foot dirty. Gundian said. Yeah, that could be the gods. That could be them. It could be just like in the ancient world, the gods were fickle. They had the failings of humans, right? So this was an attempt to most ancient religion, not really religions, but the pantheons were about people trying to grasp the physical world as they saw it with things they couldn't understand. Even to this day, try to explain fire. I can. I have a science background, but if you truly, what is fire? If most people try to explain what is fire to somebody, they kind of fall down. We don't think about it because we know it's science and it's a science thing and we move on, right? But what is gravity? What are these physical forces? Why does, so, and at that time they had less sophistication in that. What is lightning? What is even wind? These are things but they knew they existed. They unambiguously existed, but they came up with these narratives about, and it became sort of an explanation of the physical world. Django Wolf says, the Greek gods are the best for entertainment. They don't care about you, but sometimes they might help you and give you a lot of trouble. That's exactly right, because they're venile. They're prone to flattery. They have their own squabbles between each other, like family members, right? So that's what people saw them in the world. It wasn't that they would step on you, although they might. Most of the time, you're just beneath their notice because they're narcissistic, right? They're very self-centered. But if you flattered them enough, they might go ahead and give you a gift. They might get your attention. They might get angry at you and stomp on you because they thought you disrespected them. There's lots of those things. The gods were arbitrary, just like nature was arbitrary, because they lived in a world that was arbitrary. They didn't, like modern religious philosophy struggles with like the riddle of evil. That's a very well-known debate in modern religious philosophy. They didn't have that in the ancient world. They knew. It never even occurred to them that the world couldn't be harsh and brutal. They looked around, so the gods were harsh and brutal. I think that. Jangle, so yeah, that's my point. Zeus causes so much problems for the mortals by being a bad husband, but not sure it falls into evil or just self-justified. He was just lusty, right? Because like people like to get down, right? As dirty as they were, people still got down. So Zeus got down. So these were people reflective of just human failings, right? The gods reflected human failings. So where am I going with this? In the world, what's the utility of the world? So what I'm trying to say is one of the principles is the content. Religions tend to focus on when the gods themselves, like I said, they don't care about you. The religious interactions with God tend to be interactions with the gods tends to be transactional. There's no conversion. That's a big thing. There's no evangelical conversion. Now, that doesn't mean people don't kill each other for religion, right? They don't want to draw the ire of the gods, so they can still do that. But that's the principle. So the gods themselves don't care about you. The afterlife isn't dependent on them, right? So instead, let's say a sub-bullet of that, the afterlife in almost all traditions, we'll just say all for generic purposes. The afterlife is dependent on what the person does in life. So what does that mean? So it depends on their view. Like maybe they are afraid of their physical body writing. So let's say a religion focused on manos. So physical needs, the spirit stays with the body. These people there might be religions that develop around the undead, keeping people's bodies intact so that someday they can resurrect them or reincarnate them because their soul here is intact. That if they believe if the body dissolves, they can that their soul now can never truly be reincarnated, and the other souls drift throughout the metaverse, or that when they can be reincarnated, but it'll be with a different manos, so it creates a different person. So that the religions that are focused on manos, let me give another bullet with examples. Let me give some examples. Philosophies. Manos-based religion. So Manos. They preserve, so Manos-focused religion. They might preserve bodies to enable the souls to reunite and reincarnate. Gandhian was saying, what if the gods treated their followers like collectible trading cards? I'll give you 10 peasants if you give me one cleric. Yeah, that would be funny. That buys into a trope I'm getting away from, which we use too much in D&D. Like the power of the gods is dependent on the number of worshipers they have. I don't know where that ever came from. That's just a stupid game thing. I'm trying to get away from that. So I like that. I like the idea. It would be pretty cool if like you were their Magic the Gathering cards, right? People, that would be awesome. But in this sense, in this world, what I'm trying to get away from those tropes. So yeah, the gods. The reason why the gods don't care is they don't need you. They exist independent of you, but you exist independent of them. There's just an afterlife, right? Jenga was saying that is kind of what they do in Mortal Kombat, but those are inherently evil versus good gods, or just good versus evil. Yeah, we're trying to stay away from that, or leave it up to the players to decide. There's no strictly good or evil gods, but things like well, I'll get to that segment, like gods of war. Let's say Manos, like a god. We'll say preserve. An example of philosophies are like preserve bodies to enable the soul to reincarnate or reunite or reincarnate. Another example might be something like, because it'd be like a hedonistic religion, right? That enlightenment is found through physical pleasures. And that modifies your quality of life in the afterlife. So I actually was going to give an example of a god. So so they might that may not be evil. Let's say let's talk about Manos gods, like that. Maybe you can grab power by killing somebody else. That's a god. That's the god of war. They're focused on their own power, right? That everything is seen through the lens of how is power gained through my soul, and for a god or goddess in this separate world. So if you take that as a premise, you can begin to build religion. So like a god of war, their victories, their military victories, their victories in combat, all fuel their soul. They're able to take the power of their enemies. It makes them powerful in the afterlife. That's a driving religion for that. That's not evil per se, right? Maybe it is evil. It probably is, but the point of it is not to be evil. The point of it is a core philosophy for how do you survive the afterlife. Maybe even you extend your physical life in that time because of it. So another one might be like a refinement, like Bacchus, like a refinement through hedonistic life, physical pleasures. That might be so. Some giving. Manos enlightenment is found through physical pleasures. Another example would be spiritual power. Power is found through the perfection of the body. Which allows a place of honor in the afterlife. Because you become strong, physically strong, like a physically strong, conquering people translates to the afterlife. So those are just examples. So philos, what do I call it? Pheelos. I can't even. I came up with it and I can't. Phylos. Philos. So examples of philos space would be practices that hone your internal energy, like some magical practices. Any practice that adds to your spiritual energy and makes you powerful in the afterlife. I don't want to bring too many real world religions in it, but I know that's the core of, in a lot of like light and dark religions in the real world, that's the core of like maintaining your identity in the afterlife rather than sort of joining the Godhead. That's a core divide between real world religions that you see here, that they believe that there's a right hand path and a left hand path, and the right hand path is sort of always sort of becoming one with the Godhead, whatever that moral ethics are, and that you dissolve into that in the afterlife. And the left hand path is you retain your identity and your personal power, and you sort of become solidly you for all eternity. So that would be something else. Gundian was saying, idea from Manos religion, excellence in physical perfection in life in order to try and unify the three parts together upon death so that a whole soul can go true to the afterlife. I love that idea. That's a great idea. I'm actually going to write that. Matter of fact, I should do that. Like, if physical, strong Manos, develop a strong Manos, strong enough Manos can keep the other parts of your soul departing, and you become immortal. So maybe, I don't know if that's what you're saying, but that's what sparks. So like this, that's why you become a vampire, right? Your religion is that, well, you'll make the sacrifice of drinking blood to make yourself immortal, and that in your religious philosophy, that means your philos and your abaros stay in your physical form, and they're just suppressed, and that one day you'll be reborn, right? That could be a total religion. You could have an entire religion based on undead, not worship, but that's their goal, is to become undead, so that they can sort of hang around long enough to be reborn. That I could see that as a totally great religion, right? Holy crap, I love that idea. But that's an example of like how these things can drive, and they can be different. Like you can have very culturally different, like that would be extremely different from someone who found their physical pleasures, like refined their soul to the point that they were joyous going into the next world. That maybe their viewpoint instead was that if they can create as much joy and pleasure in this life through the Manos, that fueled the Philos and Abaros to become powerful in the afterlife, and that they just shed that skin when they go to the next world, and they become sort of a higher order, more powerful being in the next cycle. That could be, those are two coherent religious motivators, right, that give role-playing opportunities to the players, that motivate NPCs, that are completely different. Like those two monospace religions would be completely opposed to one another, right? That the idea of the undead one is around like the sacrifice of the body, the physical perfection, and the sacrifice and discipline involved to hold on to this undead life makes you reborn later. And this other one that's like hedonistic, and it purifies the soul enough that when it goes to the afterlife, it's powerful, and it comes back in its next cycle more enlightened and more powerful in life. Those would be two diametrically opposed religions that are totally valid within this framework. And it would drive all of this internal conflict. Like you could see why maybe one wants to hunt undead or one wants to keep them around. So the core of this is to drive sensible, relatable religious practices in the world for the players. Django Wolf was saying, maybe he thinks of Egyptians and how they prepare their dead for the afterlife, but minus the reincarnation part. Yep. Although that they did believe they were reincarnated, actually. So there was this, eventually you'd be reincarnated for some select people onto the river of dead. But actually that got that 3-part soul. Like the Egyptians had a 7-part soul or 5-part soul, depending on the period in Egyptian history. Egyptian history is, I love to tell the story. Egyptian history, thousands. Crazy. We think of Rome and we think, it was a great empire. Man, Egypt had it beat hands down. But the only one that came close would be like the Chinese Empire, which was amazing and long lasting. But one story I love to tell about how old Egypt was, how fundamental culture it was, is when the Great Pyramids of Giza were built, woolly mammoths were still alive. And you can look this up on Wikipedia. They were still alive on an island out in Russia, and they were in the process of dying off. But I love this that the woolly mammoth was still walking the earth when the pyramids of Great on the Giza were being built. And I think that's an amazing story. That's how long ago it was. I love it. Yeah. So Gundian says, so is reincarnation a thing in this world, or a concept is there, but nobody really knows it or not? That's a good question. So I mean, you can assert whatever you like. I like the idea of reincarnation. But since there's a 3-part soul, no one's quite sure what it is. Are you fully reincarnated as a being? So, I mean, if I was going to say some principles, just put a principle. Reincarnation is, stories of reincarnation are constant. Well, reincarnation is constant. Is constant, but not clear. And if you look at this, it's not clear, like they only have partial memories. People clearly have partial memories. And other items tied to previous life. But because of the nature of the soul, it's not clear. It's not like you wake up, oh, I'm Bob so-and-so. You pop out as a baby. Hey, remember me? My name's Bob. You don't do that. You just have, at best, vague memories of this past life, and no one's quite sure what it is. And that's because it could be any part of the soul. There's stories and legends of undead coming back. There's certainly undead and liches in the world, right? But maybe another driver to be undead is you don't want to give yourself up, that you're holding up, you trap. Like the lich's phylactery, you're literally, your manos is sealed in your body, your philos and abros are sealed in that jar and in the phylactery, and that's what's keeping you alive. You're literally imprisoning parts of your own soul, preventing them from going to the afterlife, and it keeps you alive in this world. Maybe that's because I love to tell this story. So I do a lot of meditation, but I love to tell this story. Like in Buddhism, the idea of, everybody's part of life itself, individuality is an illusion. And so there's a great thought, right? Because Buddhists believe in reincarnation, but they also believe that dying is like being alive is like taking a glass of water from the ocean, and that dying is pouring the glass back into the ocean. So how do you dip the glass and pull out the same water? I mean, it's a piece of philosophy I love to wrestle over. This would be the same thing. So this would be very, very similar, right? There's clearly signs of reincarnation, but it's so varied and fuzzy that no one knows exactly what it is, because there's 3 parts of the soul, and in reality, it is different things. That different religious practices lead to different outcomes. So that's one of the assertions. So reincarnation is a concept, but not clear why or how. or how. But this is a big driver for the different forms of religion. So I'm going to even put under monos that holding undead focused religions hold the monos in this world and prevent Velos and Aberos from departing, making them immortal. So failed versions of that would be ghouls, right? But like liches might be part of it. Vampires certainly a part of it. Vampire spawn, they might cut a deal. Vampire patrons might be powerful like that. The trick to make something like that work in a world is everybody's not like a drooling slope four-headed monster, right? Everything isn't just some weird, some weird purposeful thing. Jenga Wolf says that would be good seed for an adventure. Someone gets murdered, they're reincarnated, but with a very vague memory of the event and a small clue. They then quest to solve the murder, not just to avenge themselves, but to stop what evil plans the murderer might have. That's a great idea. And that's what this is for. This is for like the point of a homebrew world. It's a lot of work. But to me, the big missed opportunity is everyone tries to do a lore dump, right? That I think for the most part, when you do a homebrew world, I agree with Sly Flourish has this great write-up about having a campaign on a page. You should have the basic premises of the world and the campaign on a single page you give to the players. You highlight a few items for them for their background if you need to bring it forward. But most of the rest of everything else, you just build adventures around. So I could take any of what I'm writing here and begin to build an entire set of adventure to just talk about how Monos religious practices different from Philos religious practices and so forth, and how the expressions of it might work differently in the world. So I don't want to just do a lore dump. I'll let them, as part of this murder, they get interested in the murder. Why did it happen? It gets interesting that this person has previous lives. Oh, reincarnation is part of the world. They get to learn a little bit about the religion of the area. Maybe this person did it to themselves, end up being like something that they arranged for themselves and then forgot. Maybe the person is the villain themselves, right? Maybe it's a family rival. Maybe they were supposed to reincarnate a better, but someone didn't want them sticking around, so they wanted to do away with them even in the afterlife. There's a lot there. I think, you can do other adventures like, the ability, maybe there's a religion around keeping your family together is a way to have your ancestors watch over you in life, that you like the honoring of your ancestors and their bodies, physical bodies here left behind in the world, is lets their souls in the afterworld know that you're honoring and remembering them, so they'll watch over you in the real life. And that you can steal a rival family's graves or desecrate them or do anything to sort of mess that up. And that could be something around an adventure. The idea, again, is to just create fuel for an adventure. Like once you write these couple pages of homebrew stuff up, you can spend years running a campaign that do really nothing but explain the backstory of different elements of the world. And that's what we're doing here. Like you can look, the bullets we put up, we're all coming up with these like adventure ideas. That's the point of a homebrew setting, right? Not just do something sort of intellectually interesting, but drives, like you can clearly think 5, 6 good adventures that you can build around those. And once you get through religion and the planes and how magic works and how politics work and how cultural interplays, I don't really like racial cultures. I think that's dumb. So race-based cultures seem to be bad, although biology certainly could drive something different. We'll get to it in a different thing, but in a different stream about races. But I love this idea of like elven races being very generational, like a generational conflicts, because an elf that's up to 100 years old is resentful of the 400-year-old elf who won't let him do things, right? And maybe older elves are disdainful of younger elves because they haven't been through losing 4 generations of their human friends, right? And that they don't feel their pain. These are all great ways to drive adventure. So let's talk about Philos a little bit more. Again, Philos is this idea, any practice that adds to spirituality. Actually, let me get more specific here. So maybe acquiring of magic. Maybe this is a scholarly, like magic and magical power. Translates to powerful spirit in the afterlife. Maybe like riches. Maybe it's a sort of prosperity doctrine of theirs, where riches in life translate to a powerful soul that lets them have riches in the afterlife. So that could be very Egyptian based. They're very gaudy. They bury them with their stuff. They do all kinds of things like that. And maybe you want to rob those tombs. Maybe you want to preserve them for relatives. There's lots of things like that that can work. Yeah, Philos gives me strong key chakras. That's what I was going for. So if you look at them, it's basically, physical prowess, magical or spiritual prowess. And then like, key might be like psionic. So it's physicality, like arcana or mana, and then like meditation and psionics. That's sort of what it's really broken down to. I didn't come up with that by accident. What else could be Philos? I come up with a couple of great Manos ones, but there could be undead ones around spirits, right? But let me see. Maybe Philos, powerful spirits are able to watch over their families. So maybe great military victories. And successes. Let me talk about Baros here. We'll just get to... So actually another one could be crushing of your enemies and dominating your enemies. Creates a powerful spirit that's honored in the afterworld. This all could be drivers, right? Drivers for religion. And that's like gets into this Grummish. Like there were a lot of talks about orc, which are, that we do have to mature our discussion of orcs and things like that, goblinoids. But the idea of Grummish doesn't really give you a reason other than he's a god of slaughter, right? But let's say instead it didn't have to be orcs. It could be humans. It could be whoever. Maybe there was just a warfare that your victories in battle, right? You're dominating other creatures. The more people you can put under your will, the more you can make people bow to your power and your prowess in life, translates to the more people you can conquer, translates to a more powerful afterlife. And maybe that doesn't have to be evil. Maybe maybe the religion believes that once you've conquered them, you're responsible for them. So it's still kind of evil, but it's not purely evil, right? There's still this sense of responsibility involved. But that you're able to attack or dominate anyone who won't surrender. But once they surrender, you're now responsible for them, right? So there's all kinds of things that can truly dominate these types of religions, drive and fuel conflict. So let's go to Abaros. Sorry, I'm having too much seltzer water. Abaros. So thought of the higher self. This is the true mind, essence of being. Abaros contains the very essence of a person. Many spiritual paths exist that seek peace through contact with the true inner self. So look at this. Obviously monks, right? Meditative stuff. So I think of this a little bit more as key. So monks meditation and purity and purifying oneself through ascetic path. Now that has less conflict potential, I think, but certainly could be, that could evolve in bad ways to taking things away from people. Ascetic, there we go. What else could it be? It could be burning away of the physical self, like burning away self and sacrifice in order to reach purity. I mean, it could be things like Buddhism or the Silver Flame or something like that. Meditation and departure from suffering. That doesn't have as great. Um, that doesn't have as great adventure potential. So instead, let's put dominating minds, mind flayers, right? Dominating minds, consuming thoughts, and refining your intellect. Makes your pure self immortal. So again, these are universal drivers. We can build entire religions. Like we can come up with a sort of an academic based religion. Pure self. No, I didn't have a dash. Immortal. Yeah, that's all right. The opposite of riches. Only true spiritual strength is developed by an extreme poverty and physical hardship. That's true. Yeah, that's right. That could obviously be something that would be that ascetic path. I'm wondering what the driver for adventure I could see there. Like the adventure I could see around that is some religion of people who believe that they're purifying themselves, so they're forcing other people to like forego their physical goods, or they maybe guard. They've taken a vow of poverty themselves, but they're guarding some strong physical object that the players want to get back. And then Gundian says, "Oh, what about a tradition that does something like counting coup that the sewer planes practice?" Yep. When you could kill an enemy, you refrain and hit them with a special stick. Yeah, that's Wheel of Time has a great the Aiel in that have this great. Although they always end up stabbing people. Like the pinnacle of their religious practice is if you could defeat somebody without actually using a weapon, and actually without even hurting them. Like that's the pinnacle of the way they honor people. But yeah, so all of this would drive sort of world conflicts. Drive the players to interact with the gods, right? To either get additional lore, seek out knowledge to purify their inner self. They can seek gods that would give them spiritual power to have their philos stay around. They could seek out gods or fae to make them immortal through manos or making them undead. All of these different things drive senses of conflict and senses of adventure. Like you can build adventures around it. And that's sort of the yeah. And then you can brag about it later. Yeah, people are still people, right? So yeah, I think that, so that's pretty good. What other philosophy principles? Reincarnation is a concept, I'm not clear why. So I said afterlife is dependent on what the person does in life. Most of their actions are focused on empowering one part of the soul. Yeah, and interactions with the gods tend to be transactional, like I said. There are no evangelical religions, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, these are all, I think they're good examples. So when I got into, when you get into nation building or culture building, really nations can have multiple cultures, or culture can extend across several nations. Really, you just start getting into talking about specific religious practices there. And I would just base it on these principles, right? I would come up with, call it a certain thing. They believe X, Y, and Z. That drives these 4 or 5 behaviors, and have something rich in the world that so like, I mean, we did a lot with the mono. So I would do, what if there was a nation, they are highly focused on ancestor worship. They're like, that their political power is really displayed through opulent tombs or crypts, and that they believe that the more their ancestors' body that they can care for, the greater earthly power they have because their ancestors are watching over them. And that translates into actual mechanics in the game, right? You're a warlock and your patron is your family ancestors, or you're a paladin and you're a champion of whatever related to your family's ideals, or you are a cleric that maybe to a god that has agreed to watch over, you made a deal with to watch over the souls of your family, or your patron of your family. Those are all things that can fuel a background. Gundian says, how frequent is reincarnation? Is it a matter of days, or do souls go through queue, first in the line, first out? They entirely depend on what the population growth is like. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't think this world has to know that. I mean, I do think there are lots of things you know unambiguously, but how many angels dance on the head of a pin? That's not the kind of things you would know. People would probably begin to vary because the underlying reality is it sort of depends, right? That it depends on some of the fickleness of nature, how well different parts of the soul were held together. What people get by these behaviors is they didn't discover a truth and then follow that. They made up a truth and did what worked for them. So whatever the outcomes they get are driven by this differential development of different parts of their soul. So what people get in the world are different outcomes. They get some people who are reincarnated in whole, right? That their manos is reunited with the rest of the body and they're reborn into this world. They have memories of their old self. There are some people whose manos fades away once the body fades away itself or becomes detached. Their philos and abros actually get into a new person. And while the karma follows them, the memories don't. So you might have somebody who has attained purity and they just stay a spiritual being and they never leave the spirit world, right? So you have this this differential between people coming around, and where do souls come from is a good question, right? That that's another thing we get to probably another stream. But my world building theory on this is that there are lots of things. Most of the things that players fight, most monsters, other things like that, are single soul entities. Like a fae is pure philos. They're pure philos. They're just the embodiment of some emotional aspect of the world, right? And that a dragon is pure manos. That they don't exist in any other world that's not the prime material plane. They truly exist only in this world. They're the embodiment of whatever they are, and that. Similar like the Quarry from Eberron, which are pure like psionic beings, right? They're pure Aberos, right? So that over in the multiverse, different beings. The theory there is different beings actually form when they die. Parts of their souls reunite with other parts of other souls to become a unique person. So that you end up with two things: one, people are being recycled through reincarnation. Two, just the karma is sort of going forward. And if you really get into Buddhist religions, there's a whole bunch of philosophy you can unpack. Or three, new beings are created all the time because of the multiverse. And so the answer isn't clear because there isn't a solid answer, right? But each religion probably has their own idea because they have some limited eating the elephant experience of not understanding it because these concepts are beyond people for the most part. Gundima says, another idea for the religion that doesn't follow any of the three groupings. One of them believes any sort of refinement, changing of how you get reincarnated are unnatural and actually mess up the grand order of things. Yeah, they could. That's certainly a valid way you can approach this. Nihilistic religions certainly are. But why? I mean, what's the driver? Like, what gods are they? Like the god of chaos. What do they get out of it? Like, what do they get? Why would you follow a religion like that? What's the motivator for somebody to do it? Right? In all these other instances, it's the motivators are struggling with your own mortality, right? Some justification or ducking of it or trying to undo it, or these are all like base human needs around why we pursue religion, right? We struggle with our mortality, and that's what this is doing. What does a nihilistic religion do? Like, what would you think it does? You must have been a dragon in a previous life. Phrase you to describe everything with a hot temper. Yeah, sure. That'd be something that would be a great role-playing moment, right? Must have been a dragon. I mean, and it didn't even have to be a role-playing moment. Wouldn't it be really cool if someone said, I remember it. I was a dragon in my previous life. I died. I had gotten the favor of God, and I asked to be born as a mortal so I can experience the fullness of life. And that's their role-playing challenge, or an NPC, right? That would be great. What if you had some fae they were granted the other parts of a soul? That was some reward. Now they're a real boy or real girl, right? Or not either, non-binary. Maybe that's a great background. I don't know what the adventure driver is, but there's great there. But actually, let me back up. There's a great adventure. What if that's what the player is hired to do? There's a dragon that has an old dragon, and before he dies, you need to bring something to them to complete their quest, so they can be reborn as a mortal. That's the entire quest. That could be super dope. That would be dope. What if the sense of someone who's regrets, thought they were tricked into making themselves into undead, they want out, right? They want to be destroyed, or they want but there's some kind of undead that always just comes back and they can't be released without this special ritual, right? There's a lot there that can be unpacked, and lots of different adventures that you can go on because of that. That's the idea behind it. The idea is, and my complaint in the tweet earlier was that just there's no cohesive logic behind why people do what they do enough to form a role-playing hook around for people, one, and two, enough to form a backstory enough to create interesting conflict, to create an adventure. Those are the two things you want out of it. And I'm not perfect. I'm not writing a published setting. This is a homebrew setting that I'm doing for funsies. So this is something. This is the way I'm going to build it, and I thought I'd share a little bit of it tonight. Well, it's been about an hour, so I really want to thank everybody who's joined me today. It was great having you here. Thank you so much. I do this, I'm doing these ad hoc as the topics come up, things that sort of grab my interest and make me want to go forward. So I'll be watch on Twitter. I hope you'll give me a like, follow, subscribe, all the social media things that help me out. Again, I'm not selling anything. I'm just trying to, I love D&D. I love gaming. I've been doing it for like 40 years. Love to talk to other people interested as well. So I hope you really think about, give me a follow on Twitter or Twitch, like, subscribe, all those great things. So thank you very much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. Gundian, great to see you. Django Wolf, great to see you. Anybody else who hung around, if you're quiet, that's fine. I hope you participate in the giveaway I'm doing on Twitch. I'm doing the Steam key for Mordu. It's out there right now. So I'll draw a name. You have to be a follower. You have to retweet, and you have to, just a follower and retweet that tweet. I will go ahead and choose somebody after midnight. Somebody posted something. Why did somebody post that? So I'll go ahead and choose somebody after 11 o'clock tonight to give the Steam key away. I do occasional giveaways. I basically have humble choice. I end up with a lot of Steam keys I can't use. So a couple times a month I give away Steam key. But I don't use the hashtag giveaway because I don't want a flood of non-D&D or so. I always use the hashtag D&D. Anyway, I'm rambling. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you'll join me next time. And until next time, remember, fun is not optional. Thank you, everybody. You take care.